So let's continue, insha'Allah ta'ala, preparing for Hajj. And now we've reached a new section. This section is about what is prohibited while in the state of Ihram. Now I'm just going to be reading from something that I compiled. Yani, I'm not reading from what I'm usually reading from in these lessons so far. But when I was studying Abu Shuja' overseas, because I had taken a number of explanations of Abu Shuja', I started merging them into one explanation. So yeah, it's basically is my notes that I took from different books, put them all together. Yani, what I'm reading is handwritten from different explanations of Abu Shuja'. So nobody has a copy but me. Okay, so let's start reading about what's forbidden for the muhrim. I'm just going to, inshallah, translate directly. There's a lot of information to cover here. So now we're on a new section. The section about what is forbidden for the pilgrim or the muhrim. Now, under this section in the book of Abu Shuja', he also, we say under this section because he says fasl, section. There, fasl says section. So under this fasl, under this section, he not only talks about what's forbidden for the pilgrim, he also talks about the rules for the one who missed Arafah. And he talks about what the person who missed an obligation, what the person who missed an integral has to do, and what the person who missed an obligation has to do. And is there anything for a person who missed a recommendation to do? But we're not going to try to cover all of that today. All we want to cover today, inshallah, is what's forbidden for the muhrim. So these are the muharramat of ihram. Muharramat, those are the things that are forbidden because of the ihram. And for someone to be sinful for committing any of these things we're going to talk about, to be sinful for doing any of these, he would have to have done them deliberately, while mindful. Yani he's not forgetting he's in a state of ihram, so he did it deliberately and mindfully, and knowing that it's haram, and not an excused ignorant person, and choosing to do it, not forced by anyone to do it, and accountable. So not crazy nor a child. So there's a number of forbidden things. Abu Shuja' tells us there are 10 of them. And the first of these things is wearing stitched clothing. Wearing stitched clothing. That's for a man, not for a woman. The woman can wear stitched clothing because for her to cover her body is more urgent than for a man to cover his body. The woman's covering her body is more urgent than a man's covering his body. So she can wear the stitched clothing, and the man, while in the state of ihram, he cannot wear stitched clothing. Stitched clothing means clothing that surrounds the body by stitching, like a shirt, and like shoes, and pants. And anything that's like stitching is forbidden, like stitched clothing. Like if it's uh, woven, like what if your grandmother made a sweater for you out of a ball of yarn, and she didn't attach the sleeve to the torso and attach the other sleeve to the torso and attach a collar to the head. It's not made of stitching. Yeah, it doesn't have the stitches to hold it together. It's just woven. The thread all woven together. This one too is haram if you're muhrim. And also what is compressed. like the fez, the fez, this compressed material, like some men wear that red fez on their heads. This is haram for the muhrim. Now, we're not talking about the head yet, by the way. I'm mentioning the red fez. The fez is a headgear. We're not even talking about headgear at the moment in particular. So if a man had a shirt that's like a fez, but it's a shirt, or pants, like I mentioned for you last time. So like he's stiff. Looks like he's stiff as a board walking around with a shirt that's made of compressed material and pants made of compressed material. This too is haram for the muhrim. And this is forbidden for any part of the man's body. So it includes his foot and includes his beard. So if he had a sack for his beard, if a man had a sack for his beard, then he can't wear that while he's in the state of ihram. This is because of a hadith that's in the two books of Sahih, the two authentic books, the books of Al-Bukhari and Muslim, that a man said or asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what can a muhrim wear of clothing? What clothing can a muhrim wear? And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him what the muhrim cannot wear. The man asked him, what can the muhrim wear? So the Prophet told him what the muhrim cannot wear. That's very interesting. I just realized it now while I'm reading with you. That's the benefit of teaching. That's why you want to teach. If you want to understand the knowledge, then one great way to understand, to have comprehension, is to teach. Teaching the knowledge will unravel it for you right before your eyes. And another way to have comprehension is to memorize. So the man asked him, what can the muhrim wear? And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him what the muhrim cannot wear. So he told him, do not wear of clothing as a muhrim a shirt, the qamis. Qamis is the long shirt. Nor a turban, nor pants, nor a hood, nor hoofs, the footgear, like socks, unless you cannot find sandals. Then you can wear the shoes, this footgear, but they have to cut them open under the ankle. And also, etc. There's more to that hadith. And also, it's forbidden for the male pilgrim to cover his head, or even part of his head. And this is not forbidden for the woman. And he can't cover his head with what is counted as a cover normally, something that's normally called a cover. And it's not a condition that this thing that's normally a cover would be encompassing of the entire head. Doesn't have to be an entire skull cap or an entire wave cap, if you know what those are. Yani, stocking cap on the head, stocking cap, the stocking cap, which is, yani, some people would take a stocking and put it on their head for to make waves in their hair. This is going to leave a line on his forehead because he slept like that all night. He can't wear something like that, even if it only covers part of his head. So that's going to include a towel. If you are a muhrim and you washed your head, you can't put a towel on your head because that's a cover. So then, yes, of course, it would be forbidden for the man to wear a turban while he's in a state of ihram, or yani a qalansuwa, that's a kufi. But different cultures call qalansuwa something else, different things. So where I'm from, we call it kufi. That's what the Muslim man wears on his head usually on a normal day. What the Muslim man puts on his head is qalansuwa, is kufi, or a fez, like we were saying. So it doesn't matter whether it's made out of cotton or it's made out of leather or etc. And even if he covered his head with mud, This is haram because this is counted as a cover, or clay if you want. Clay, clean, not mud, clay. But what's not considered a cover, like putting his hand on his head, that's not a cover. That's not counted as a cover for the head. Or submerging himself underwater so that the water covers his head, that's not counted as a cover. Or having an umbrella, using an umbrella, that's not counted as a cover, even if it touches his head. It's not counted as a cover. So if a man wears what covers his head, or he wears clothing, stitched clothing over his body without an excuse, then he has a sin and he's going to have to fulfill an expiation. Yeah, and he's going to have to make some reparation. You said, can a man wear a backpack or a neck wallet, or the like while in the state of ihram? A neck wallet. Wallahi, I never heard of a neck wallet in my life. As for the backpack, I don't know. Like with a string and a holder to hold your passport and money. Uh, so it means like a string around his neck that has something. Okay, I don't know. Subhanallah. You make up the word. You said that neck wallet. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. You don't know what I'm imagining in my mind. I'm like a neck wallet, huh? That's interesting there. You said in Indonesia it's called, is it Pacey? Am I saying it right? Or Kalansua? Pacey?
Yes, yes, Shehi Pechi.
Pacey. MashaAllah. So what about sunglasses? I don't know. MashaAllah. Okay. But if he did wear such a thing with an excuse, like he was afraid for himself from the intense heat or from intense cold, yani like he was afraid to die because it's so hot or it's so cold, or for a medicinal reason, like he has a medical excuse to wear what we're saying he can't wear, and then he doesn't sin, but he still has to fulfill an expiation. Still going to have to fulfill the expiation. And as for a female or a hermaphrodite, and you know, whenever we say hermaphrodite in these lessons like this, I don't have to say a problematic hermaphrodite. There's two types of hermaphrodites to remind you. Hermaphrodite, firstly, what's hermaphrodite here? Khuntha. Hermaphrodite means as someone who's born with an extra organ, basically has a deformity, a person who has a particular deformity, which is that this one was created with an extra sexual organ. That's hermaphrodite. Now, being born like that does not mean that you don't know the person's gender. Could be clearly a woman who has a deformity, or clearly a man who has a deformity. But sometimes this deformity makes the person's gender unknown. It's not a third gender, and it's not a lack of a gender. The gender is unknown, and this person is definitely either a male or a female. So this one whose gender is unknown is called khuntha mushkil, problematic hermaphrodite. In all of these lessons, I don't have to say problematic here because it's clear. If a clear man with a deformity or a clear woman with a deformity, if a clear man has such a deformity, or a clear woman has such a deformity, then it's a clear man or a clear woman, so the judgment is known. So I don't have to, they're not intended here when we say hermaphrodite. So when it comes to a woman or a hermaphrodite, it's not forbidden for either of those two types to cover the head or to wear clothing by stitching. Rather, it is forbidden for the woman to cover her face. It is forbidden for the woman to cover her face. or even some of her face with something that's called a cover, normally, like how we were talking about the man covering his head. Yani, the woman's face, the female pilgrim, her face is like the male pilgrim's head. So she can't cover her face like the male pilgrim cannot cover his head. But it is obligatory on her to cover some of her face, which is what? The amount by which she fulfills her obligation of covering her aura. There's no sin in that. Not more. And it is permissible for a woman to hide her face. I'm going to avoid saying cover here, her face. I'm just going to say hide. It is permissible for her to hide her face by draping a cloth that comes down without touching her face. So she has some rods that come out, that protrude from her head, and then she drapes something down that hides her face without touching her face. This is permissible. And then, if she did that, if the cover touches her face uh, by her own volition, her own choice, if the cover covers, if the what's hiding her face touches her face by her own will, then she will have a sin and she will have an expiation. But if she has an excuse, she's still going to have to fulfill the expiation, but she won't have a sin. And this is what the wives of the Prophet used to do, alayhi salatu wassalam, because they had an obligation that other believing women did not have. The obligation of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, ummahatul mu'mineen, the mothers of the believers, their obligation was to cover their faces. This is special to them, not to other believing women. So, if they were obligated to cover their faces, then what can they do when they're in the state of ihram, when it's forbidden to cover the face? Then what they used to do is put some rods and drape a cloth down that hides their face without touching their face. This way, they fulfilled both obligations, and the other believing women can do like them in this case. He said the hermaphrodite who's it's unknown if they are male or female, they will cover themselves like females. That's correct. The general rule for the hermaphrodite is whatever's precautious. Their judgment is whatever's precautious. So, for example, can a man wear golden jewelry? No, he can't. Can a woman? Yes, she can. Can a hermaphrodite? No. A hermaphrodite cannot wear golden jewelry because maybe this one is a man, so it has to go by precaution. Can a hermaphrodite lead a man in prayer? No, he can't. He might be a woman. Can he follow a woman in prayer? No, he can't because he might be a man. Can he lead a woman in prayer? Yes, he can, because whether he's a man or a woman, he could lead a woman in the prayer. So that's how the rules of hermaphrodite go. So hermaphrodite's going to cover in front of men like a woman. I mean, and you too. And then when it comes to marriage, this hermaphrodite cannot get married, not until gender becomes clear. And there's a benefit that the Sheikh mentions whenever he talks about this subject, which is the fact that what we are talking about now proves that the believing women are not obligated to cover their faces. The subject in which we are involved proves that the believing women are not obligated to cover their faces. How is that? Because if they were obligated to cover their faces, then this would mean that when they make Hajj and when they pray, because it's not recommended for her to cover her face in her prayer, this would mean that when they make Hajj and when they pray, that they should uncover some of their nakedness. And this would mean that the worship is calling for the woman to be more exposed. If a woman were obligated to cover her face, then it would mean that the worship calls for her to be less covered than when she's not worshiping. And this is untrue. So the fact that this is what Sheikh taught us, the fact that it's forbidden for the muhrima to cover her face and disliked for the musalliyah, the woman who's praying, to cover her face proves that she's not even obligated to cover her face. Because that would mean then that all her day when she's doing her errands, she has to cover her face, and then when it's time to pray, she should uncover her face. This would mean the prayer calls for her to be more exposed, and that the Hajj calls for her to be more exposed, and this is untrue. That's besides the actual proofs from hadiths and Quran that we're not going to go into now because that's another subject. And the third prohibition is uh, here greasing the hair. Greasing the hair. The way it's translated here, that's correct, but that's not really what Abu Shuja said. Abu Shuja said combing the hair. وَتَرْجِيلُ الشَّعْرِ. So the accurate rule is that it's not haram for the pilgrim to comb his hair. What it is that is haram for him to grease his hair or to do what's like greasing the hair. The combing itself is disliked. Combing the hair as a pilgrim is disliked, and also scratching at the hair with the nail, scratching at the head with the nail as a pilgrim is disliked, not haram. So what's meant, even though Abu Shuja said combing the hair, what's meant is to grease it, like putting olive oil in the hair or any other type of oil, whatever's like it, or even putting wax in the hair, which some people do, like some people have dreads. So they put a type of wax in their hair, something that keeps the hair tight. This is haram while you are a pilgrim, even if it's unscented. It's not a condition to be scented that it's haram. You just can't do it. And the hair here means the hair of the head and the hair of the face. The hair of the head and the hair of the face. So all the facial hair is like the mustache, the beard, and the anfaqah, the soul patch. That's the hair that grows under the bottom lip. But the rest of the body, it's not haram for a person to uh, oil the hair of the other parts of his body or to grease the hair of the other parts of his body, as long as it's not scented, because wearing fragrance is another issue. And so if a man were bald, then it's not haram for him to oil his head. And if a man does not have facial hair, his face is smooth, he has a baby face, no beard, nothing on his jawbones, nothing on his chin, nothing on his cheeks, then it's not haram for him to oil his jawbones. And it's not haram for the pilgrim to use soap. And it's not disliked for him to use soap, but it has to be unscented, as long as he's not pulling any hairs out on purpose. And the fourth prohibition, according to what Abu Shuja said, the way he worded it, he said shaving the hair. He said combing the hair and shaving it. So both of those wordings are not most accurate words. As for the shaving, the case needs a broader word. Yes, the shaving is haram until the time of shaving comes in, of course. But shaving and other than shaving. So removal of the hair is a better word than shaving the hair. Because shaving means you took the razor blade and you used the razor blade to cut the hair from the skin. But it's also haram, for example, to pull that hair out from the root, which is not shaving. And it's haram to cut that hair with scissors. That's not shaving either. Yeah, so had he used a broader word like removal, then that would have been better. But if the pilgrim were to actually just peel his scalp, he peeled his whole scalp. That means that the skin that has the hair in it, he peeled it off of his head. Then there's no fidya here. There's no expiation to fulfill here. But that's haram because it's not permissible for one to harm himself like this. And if one is doubting, yani, like he woke up, he found hair on his pillow, or the likes of that, or he has hair somewhere he found, so he doesn't know. Did I pull that hair out, or it came out without me pulling it out? Then there is no expiation here. And the fifth prohibition is clipping the nails. Yani, that's the way Abu Shuja worded it also. And a broader word is better here too. Is better here too. Removing the nails, whether fingernails or toenails, because the nails are like hair. SubhanAllah. See how we are creations of Allah. We are creatures that Allah created. He just gave us a privilege. The type of creature we are, which is the human kind, He gave us a privilege. But we are creatures. SubhanAllah, look at the other animals. They have hairs, they have nails. We have hair, we have nails. We are creatures of Allah Ta'ala. He gave us nice shape and He gave us minds and then He gave us obligations. So there's no difference between clipping the nail and biting the nail and breaking the nail or the like. But if the pilgrim broke his nail, yani, not he broke it, but his nail broke. If the pilgrim's nail broke, and then this is harmful for him, and he can't leave it like that, then he can remove the broken one. And there's no expiation. Also, if he removes his nail from the cuticle, removing the nail from the cuticle without harm, that means all the way from the tip. You know what I mean by the cuticle, inshallah. He removed his nail all the way, like the whole nail, down to the cuticle. If a pilgrim did that without harming himself, if he could do that without harming himself, then there's no sin and there's no expiation. But if that harms him, then there's a sin. And the sixth prohibition, he said, how about if he forgot and he pulled his hair and afterwards he remembered? Then that goes back to what we already mentioned here. What did we say is the condition for the person to be sinful? We said it is a condition for a person to be sinful in these cases that he does them intentionally while mindful, not forgetful of his state of ihram and knowing that it's haram, and he's not ignorant and he wasn't forced to do it and he's accountable. And the sixth prohibition is fragrance. We have it worded here, perfume. You're welcome. If you want perfuming, which is uh, applying that which is for the purpose of fragrance. Applying that which its purpose is fragrance. So that's even if it's a flower. And even if it's camphor, camphor. And of course, gonna include musk. So applying anything that's usually sought for its fragrance, whether he applied it to his body or to his clothing. And when it comes to his body, then even smelling it is counted as perfuming, even if it doesn't stick to his nose. That's if he carried it. If he carried it and smelled it, if he picked it up and brought it to his nose to smell it, then this is counted as perfuming, even if it doesn't stick to his nose. But if he smells it without carrying it, then it's not counted as perfuming. That's as far as the body is concerned. And as for the clothing, he would be counted as perfuming if he actually applies the perfume to his clothing, like what people do normally. Smelling rose water is not harmful. Just smelling it is not harmful, but applying it to the body is applying it to the body is harmful. Here means haram. That's because when you're talking about rose water, the way to perfume by using rose water is not to just smell it, but just to put it on the body. And uh, when it comes to incense, then perfuming by incense is by burning it, not carrying it, and not smelling it, and not eating it. And it's going to be counted as perfuming if you put the fragrance in your pocket open, not in a not in a sealed bottle, for example. But if a person carried this perfume in a bag because he wants to sell it, for example, or in some sort of pouch, or in a rag wrapped up and tied up, this rag wrapped up and tied up containing perfume, this is not haram. And it's forbidden for the person to use the perfume on the inside and the outside. Inside means like if he puts the perfume in his food and then he eats the perfume. That's haram too. That's going to be counted as perfuming. Or anything like that. Like he did an enema with perfume. That means he injected the perfume into himself. So when we say anything that's sought for its fragrance usually, then it's clear for you that means that includes yani soap, deodorant for the armpits, shampoo, and lotion, baby lotion, and the likes people buy for their smell. Yani, maybe for another reason too, but the smell too. So whatever sought for its fragrance, you can't use it while you're in a state of ihram. So then, if you're going to Hajj, then get yourself some scentless stuff, scentless deodorant, scentless whatever you want to use. This is for men and women. All what we're saying now is for men and women. The only difference between the men and the women here is covering the head and wearing stitched clothing and covering the face, and gloves for the woman also. With the gloves, even the gloves, that's for men and women. It's forbidden for men and women pilgrims to wear gloves. And it's forbidden for the men to wear the stitched clothing, not the women. And forbidden for the men to cover their heads, not the women. Forbidden for the women to cover their faces. And then everything else is the same for men and women. Ameen wa fikum. No problem. Okay, Bismillah. Now, if the person had perfume in his food, if he had perfume in his food, but it disappeared, like doesn't appear in his food at all, then it's not haram to eat this food. And this rule doesn't matter whether the person can smell or he can't smell. That's not the judgment. We're not going to say, well, he's the type of person he can't smell. So now you have like blind people, you have deaf people. There's some people they can't smell. SubhanAllah. Isn't that what was happening with COVID? People getting COVID and then they couldn't smell and they couldn't taste. SubhanAllah. Imagine getting a sickness that makes you blind. SubhanAllah. May Allah protect us. Ameen. It doesn't matter if this person can't smell, the judgment is the same. Uh, and so you can notice about these prohibitions, or some of them, that they involve, uh, what can I call them? Yani, the Arabic word is tarafuh. Tarafuh, it's like, I don't want to say grooming oneself, But put it this way, if you live like this, what we're saying is haram on a muhrim. Imagine if you just live like that all the time. So what's your case going to be? Your case is going to be that your hair is going to be dry and cracking, and your nails are going to get long, and you're not going to wear, a lot of kind of clothes. So there's certain uh, accommodation, a certain, I don't want to say luxury also, but an amount of making your own situation easier for yourself in putting perfume, clipping your nails, trimming your hair, for example. So these things are haram for the muhrim. So the case of the muhrim is that he wants to be the dusty, unkempt one. The dusty, unkempt one. Unkempt means his hair is messy. Didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that Allah has slaves who they only have two garments, one garment for the upper half and one garment for the lower half, and their hair is unkempt, so they have messy hair. So yani, it's like, for example, if you saw a homeless person, and if they were to go to the people would turn them away. But if they were to ask Allah, Allah would give them what they ask for. This is the one the pilgrim wants to be like. But it's not easy to live like that usually. So that means you do want to get out of the state of ihram. We're not going to be able to finish all of these muharramat now. Our time is up. So we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll continue next week. Maybe we'll recap and then continue from there. Yani, I wasn't even really as prepared as I wanted to be today, subhanallah. So next week, I ask Allah to enable me to be very prepared next week, and then inshallah ta'ala, we'll have good lesson, and perhaps we'll finish all of these prohibitions. Amin wa fiq. So what about the one who wears lotion, fragrance free, as long as he's not putting it in his hair? He can't grease his hair, is what we mentioned. And the hair here means the hair of the head and the hair of the face, not the hair of the rest of the body. Amin wa fikum. One sister told me that she did in her time of ignorance before she learned. She did not get out of the state of ihram, and she didn't know. And then when she learned, she knew she never got out of the state of ihram. And then she went for some time in her life where she didn't clip her nails and she didn't like put grease in her hair. And as we're going to say, also, when you're in a state of ihram, you can't get married. And if you are married, you can't be intimate with your spouse. So you definitely want to learn the rules of Hajj properly and get out of the state of ihram so that you could resume your normal life, inshallah ta'ala. طيب سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك